When I re entered my room, I could hear people talking. So I sat on the edge of my bed for a while and listened through my hollow bedroom door. Dad, so you met Hazel at support group Augustus? Yes, sir. This is a lovely house you have got. I like your artwork. Mom, thank you, Augustus. Dad, you were a survivor yourself then. Augustus, I am. I didn't cut this fella off for the sheer unadulterated pleasure of it. Although it is an excellent weight loss strategy, legs are heavy. Dad, and how is your health now? Augustus, NST for 14 months. Mom, that's wonderful. The treatment options these days, it really is remarkable. Augustus, yeah, I know I'm lucky. Dad, you have to understand that Hazel is still sick, Augustus, and will be for the rest of her life. She will want to keep up with you, but her lungs, at which point I emerged, silencing him. So where are you going? Asked Mom. Augustus stood up and leaned over to her, whispering the answer, and then held a finger to his lips. Shh, he told her. It's a secret. Mom smiled. You've got your phone, she asked me. I held it up as evidence, tilted my oxygen car onto its front wheels, and started walking. Augustus hustled over, offering me his arm, which I took, my fingers wrapped around his biceps. Unfortunately, he insisted upon driving, so the surprise could be a surprise. As we shuddered toward our destination, I said, You nearly charmed the pants of my mom. Yeah, and your dad is a Smiths fan, which helps. You think they like me? Sure, they did. Who cares though? They're just parents. They're your parents, he said, glancing over at me. Plus, I like being liked. Is that crazy? Well, you don't have to rush to hold doors open or smother me in compliments for me to like you. He slammed the brakes, and I flew toward forward hard enough that my breathing felt weird and tight. I thought of the PET scan. Don't worry is useless. I worried anyway. We burned rubber, roaring away from a stop sign before turning left onto the misnomer Grand View. There is a view of a golf course, I guess, but nothing grand. The only thing I could think of in this direction was the cemetery. Augustus reached into the center console, flipped open a full pack of cigarettes, and removed one. Do you ever throw them away? I asked him. One of the many benefits of not smoking is that packs of cigarettes last forever. He answered, I have had this one for almost a year. A few of them are broken near the filters, but I think this pack could easily get me to my 18th birthday. He held the filter between his fingers, then put it in his mouth. So, okay, he said, okay, name some things that you never see in Indianapolis. Skinny adults, I say. He laughed. Good, keep going. Beaches, family-owned restaurants, topography, all excellent examples of things we lack. Also, culture. Yeah, we're a bit short on culture, I said, finally realizing where he was taking me. Are we going to the museum? In a manner of speaking. Oh, are we going to that park or whatever? Gus looked a bit deflated. Yes, we are going to that park or whatever, he said. You've figured it out, haven't you? Figured out what? Nothing. There was this park behind the museum where a bunch of artists had made big sculptures. I'd heard about it but had never visited. We drove past the museum and parked right next to this basketball court filled with huge blue and red steel arcs that imagine the path of a bouncing ball. We walked down what passes for a hill in Indianapolis to this clearing where kids were climbing all over this huge oversized skeleton sculpture. The bones were each about waist high, and then thigh bone was longer than me. It looked like a child's drawing of a skeleton rising up out of the ground. My soul soldier hurt. I worried the cancer had spread from my lungs. I imagined the tumor metastasizing into my own bones, boring holes into my skeleton, slithering ill of insidious intent. Funky bones, Augustus said, created by Joe van Lysau. Sounds Dutch. He is, Gus said. So is Rick Smith. So are tulips. Gus stopped in the middle of the clearing with the bones right in front of us and slipped his backpack of one soldier then the other. He unzipped it, producing an orange blanket, a pint of orange juice, and some sandwiches wrapped in plastic wrap with the crust cut off. What's with all the orange? I asked, still not wanting to let myself imagine that all this would lead to Amsterdam. National color of the Netherlands, of course. Remember William of Orange and everything? He wasn't on the GAD test. I smiled, trying to contain my excitement. Sandwich, he asked. Let me guess, I said. Does cheese and tomato? The tomatoes are from Mexico. Sorry. You're always such a disappointment, Augustus. Couldn't you have at least gotten orange tomatoes? He laughed, and we ate our sandwiches in silence, watching the kids play on the sculpture. I couldn't very well ask him about it, so I just sat there surrounded by Dutchness, feeling awkward and hopeful. In the distance, soaked in the unblemished sunlight, so rare and precious in our hometown, a gaggle of kids made a skeleton into a playground, jumping back and forth among the prosthetic bones. Two things I love about this sculpture, Augustus said. He was holding the unlit cigarette between his fingers, flicking at it as if to get rid of the ash. He placed it back in his mouth. First, the bones are just far enough apart that if you are a kid, you cannot resist the urge to jump between them. Like you just have to jump from rib cage to skull, which means that second, the sculpture essentially forces children to play on bones. The symbolic resonances are endless. Hazel Grace, you do love symbols, I said, hoping to steer the conversation back toward the many symbols of the Netherlands at our picnic. Right about that, you are probably wondering why you are eating a bad cheese sandwich and drinking orange juice and why I am wearing the jersey of a Dutchman who played a sport I have come to loathe. It has crossed my mind, I said. Haligrus, like so many children before you, and I said this with great affection, you spent your wish hastily, with little care for the consequences. The Grim Reaper was staring you in the face, and the fear of dying with your wish still in your proverbial pocket, ungranted, led you to rush toward the first wish you could think of, and you, like so many others, chose the cold and artificial pleasures and of the theme park. I actually had a great time on that trip. I met Goofy and Mean. I'm in the midst of a soliloquy. I wrote this out and memorized it, and if you interrupt me, I will completely screw it up. Augustus interrupted. Pleased to be eating your sandwich and listening. The sandwich was incredibly dry, but I smiled and took a bite anyway. Okay, where was I? The artificial pleasures. He turned the cigarette to its back. Right, the cold and artificial pleasures of the theme park, but let me submit that the real heroes of the Wish Factory are the young men and women who wait like Vladimir and Stragon wait for Godot, and good Christian girls wait for marriage. These young heroes wait stoically and without complaint for their one true wish to come along. Sure, it may never come along, but at least they can rest easily in the grave knowing that they have done their little part to preserve the integrity of the wish as an idea. But then again, maybe it will come along. Maybe you will realize that your one true wish is to visit the brilliant Peter Van Houten in his Amsterdamian exile, and you will be glad indeed to have saved your wish. Augustus stopped speaking long enough that I figured the soliloquy was over, but I didn't save my wish, I said. Ah, he said, and then after what felt like a practiced pause, he added, but I saved mine. Really? I was surprised that Augustus was wish eligible. What with being still in school and a year into remission, you had to be pretty sick for the genius to hook you up with a wish. I got it in exchange for the leg. He explained. There was all this light on his face. He had to squint to look at me, which made his nose crinkle adorably. Now, I'm not going to give you my wish or anything, but I also have an interest in meeting Peter Van Houten. And it wouldn't make sense to meet him without the girl who introduced me to his book. It definitely wouldn't, I said. So I talked to the genies, and they are in total agreement. They said Amsterdam is lovely in the beginning of May. They proposed leaving May 3rd and returning May 7th. Tara, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5 days. Augustus, really? He reached over and touched my cheek, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. My body tensed, and I think he saw it because he pulled his hand away. Augustus, I said, really? You don't have to do this. Sure, I do, he said. I found my wish. God, you are the best, I told him. I bet you say that to all the boys who finance your international travel, he answered. Chapter 6. Mom was folding my laundry while watching this TV show called The View. When I got home, I told her that the tulips and the Dutch artist and everything were all because Augustus was using his wish to take me to Amsterdam. That's too much, she said, shaking her head. We can accept that from a virtual stranger. He is not a stranger, he is easily my second best friend. Behind Caitlin, behind you. I said it was true, but I mostly said it because I wanted to go to Amsterdam. I'll ask Dr. Maria, she said after a moment. Dr. Maria said I couldn't go to Amsterdam without an adult intimately familiar with my case, which more or less meant either mom or Dr. Maria herself. My dad understood my cancer the way I did, in the vague and incomplete way people understand electrical circuits and ocean tides, but my mom knew more about differentiated thyroid carcinoma in adolescence than most oncologists. So you will come, I said. The genius will pay for it. The genius are loaded. But your father, she said, he would miss us. It wouldn't be fair to him. And he can't get time off work. Are you kidding? You don't think dad would enjoy a few days of watching TV shows that are not about aspiring models and ordering pizza every night, using paper towels as plates so he doesn't have to do the dishes? Mom laughed. Finally, she started to get excited, typing asks into her phone. She had have to call Gus' parents and talk to the genius about my medical needs and do they have a hotel yet and what are the best guidebooks and we should do our research if we only have 3 days and so on. I kind of had a headache, so I downed a couple Advil and decided to take a nap. But I ended up just lying in bed and replaying the whole picnic with Augustus. I couldn't stop thinking about the little moment when I had tensed up as he touched me. The gentle familiarity felt wrong. Somehow, I thought maybe it was how orchestrated the whole thing had been. Augustus was amazing, but he had overdone everything at the picnic, right down to the sandwich that were metaphorically resonant but tasted terrible, and the memorized soliloquy that prevented conversation. It all felt romantic, but not romantic. But the truth is that I had never wanted him to kiss me, not in the way you are supposed to want these things. I mean, he was gorgeous. I was attracted to him. I thought about him in that way, to borrow a phrase from the middle school vernacular, but the actual touch, the realized touch, it was all wrong. Then I found myself worrying I would have to make out with him to get to Amsterdam, which is not the kind of thing you want to be thinking, because it shouldn't even be a question whether I wanted to kiss him. And kissing someone so that you can get a free trip is perilously close to full on hooking. And I have to confess that while I did not fancy myself a particularly good person, I never thought my first real sexual action would be prostitutional. But then again, he hadn't tried to kiss me. He had only touched my face, which is not even sexual. It was not a move designed to elicit arousal, but it was certainly a designed move because Augustus Waters was no improviser. So, what had he been trying to convey, and why hadn't I wanted to accept it? At some point, I realized I was Caitlining the encounter, so I decided to text Caitlin and asked for some advice. She called immediately. I have a boy problem, I said. Delicious, Caitlin responded. I told her all about it, complete with the awkward face touching, leaving out only Amsterdam and Augustus name. You were sure he is hot? She asked when I was finished. Pretty sure, I said. Athletic? Yeah, he used to play basketball for North Central. Wow, how did you meet him? They this serious support group. Huh? Caitlin said, out of curiosity, how many legs does this guy have? Like 1.4, I said, smiling. Basketball players are famous in Indiana, and although Caitlin didn't go to North Central, her social connectivity was endless. Augustus Waters, she said. Maybe. Oh my god, I have seen him at parties. The things I would do to that boy, I mean, not now that I know you're interested in him, but oh, sweet Hollyler, I would ride that one legged pony all the way around the coral. Caitlin, I said, sorry, do you think you had have to be on top? Caitlin, I said, what are you talking about, right? And you, Augustus Waters, maybe are you gay? I don't think so. I mean, I definitely like him. Does he have ugly hands? Sometimes beautiful people have ugly hands. No, he has kind of amazing hands. She said. I said. After Caitlin said, remember Derek? He broke up with me last week because he had decided there was something fundamentally incompatible about us deep down and that we had only get hurt more if we played it up. He called it preemptive dumping. So maybe you have this premonition that there is something fundamentally incompatible and you are preempting the preemption. I said, I'm just thinking out loud here. Sorry about Derek. Oh, I got over it, darling. It took me a sleeve of Girl Scout 10 minutes and 40 minutes to get over that boy. I loved. Well, thanks, Caitlin. In the event you do hook up with him, I expect lascivious details. But of course, I said, and then Caitlin made a kissy sound into the phone, and I said bye, and she hung up. I realized while listening to Caitlin that I didn't have a premonition of hurting him. I had a postmonition. I pulled out my laptop and looked up Caroline Mathers. The physical similarities were striking. Same theoretically round face, same nose, same approximate overall body shape, but her eyes were dark brown, minor green, uh, and her complexion was much darker, Helen or something. Thousands of people, literally thousands, had left condolence messages for her. It was an endless scroll of people who missed her, so many that it took me an hour of clicking to get past the "I'm sorry you are dead" wall post to the "I'm praying for you" wall post. She has died a year ago of brain cancer. I was able to click through to some of her pictures. Augustus was in a bunch of the earlier ones, pointing with a thumbs up to the jagged scar across her bald skull. And Mina are at Memorial Hospital's playground with their backs facing the camera, kissing while Caroline held the camera out so you could only see their noses and closed eyes. The most recent pictures were all of her before, when she was healthy, uploaded post-mortem by friends, beautiful girl, wide-hipped and curvy, with long, straight, dead black hair falling over her face. My healthy self looked very little like her healthy self, but our cancer self might have been sisters. No wonder he'd stared at me the first time he saw me. I kept clicking back to this one wall post written 2 months ago, 9 months after she died, by one of her friends. We all miss you so much. It just never ends. It feels like we were all wounded in your battle, Caroline. I miss you. I love you. After a while, mom and dad announced it was time for dinner. I shut down the computer and got up, but I couldn't get wall post out of my mind. And for some reason, it made me nervous and hungry and unhungry. I keep thinking about my soldier with her. Also, I still had the headache, but maybe only because I had been thinking about a girl who had died of brain cancer. I kept telling myself to compartmentalize, to be here now at the circular table, arguably too large in diameter for three people, and definitely too large for two, with this soggy broccoli and black bean burger that all the ketchup in the world could not adequately moisten. I told myself that imagining a mate in my brain or my soldier would not affect the invisible reality going on inside of me, and that therefore all such thoughts were wasted moments in a life composed of a definitionally finite set of such moments. I even tried to tell myself to live my best self today.